And welcome into another Lock It Up with Kurtz podcast. I am John Kurtz, joined by Aaron Lockett, former K-State and NFL wide receiver. Talking K-State football once again today as the Wildcats get ready for Texas in the regular season finale. Unfortunately, that will be coming off of a loss. K-State goes down 20-10 at home against the Baylor Bears, a team that was just outside the top 10, now is back in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings. So certainly no shame in that, no shame in the loss. But there were plenty of chances we will break down here on the podcast for K-State to actually break through and win this game. I don't know how many of you will be headed to Austin on Black Friday, the timing of that, the excitement or lack thereof of this game at this point in time. But if you are, make sure you bring along the 360 vodka from Holiday Distillery to get that ready to go, whatever it is that you want at your tailgate, craft cocktails, batch drinks. They've got you covered, whatever it is that you need if you're watching it at home as well. I imagine a lot of people will be hanging out with the family. You can make that more bearable with some 360 vodka if they're going to be watching the game with you in one of those situations on Friday. Yes, Friday. K-State plays Friday, not Saturday. But to break down, Aaron, the game against Baylor, I mean, frankly, it just comes down to K-State's offense didn't have enough. The Baylor defense really put the chokehold on them throughout the entire game. There were chances, and K-State definitely had some miscues, namely the muff punt early on in the game that set Baylor up with a short field for some points. But K-State's offense just never felt game or ready to take advantage of some of the opportunities that may have been there when they were.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head, right? The early turnover really cost us, but that's how those big games go sometimes. We found ourselves back into the game later on, but Baylor has a stiff defense. Like, Bernard was flying around at linebacker, Petrie at the safety position. I mean, they really played well. They limited their number of mistakes, unfortunately for us. We weren't able to pass the ball as efficiently as we needed to. We talked about going into that game that we needed to rely on the receivers a little bit more, and hopefully Skylar could put the ball in their hands, but that didn't really materialize the way we needed it to. But obviously, we'll talk more about the game. Deuce did what he always does, right? He hits you for a big play, gets you some points on the board. I personally don't think we found those enough, right? We've got to find a way to get that young man the ball, talented. And as you saw, when he caught the ball, broke a tackle, got vertical, but one catch just won't work against a big-time team like Baylor.
Yeah, there was the one play you mentioned late in the game, and K-State wound up not being able to do anything with that big play where they finally got him free down the deep middle of the field. I mean, outside of Deuce Vaughn, there was not much offense to speak of for basically anybody. Deuce broke off one big play. And when you talk about the receivers, it just didn't feel like Skylar Thompson was ever very comfortable. And certainly his injury status is something that we will talk about now as he got hurt at the end of the game. Really back to the West Virginia game, he makes the one tremendous throw to Sammy Wheeler on fourth down that basically won the game. But that was not really a great Skylar Thompson game either. So after he played much of the season at a really high level, the last 2 weeks, particularly against Baylor, he just didn't look comfortable or willing to try and cut it deep.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think they got very comfortable using Deuce out the backfield, right? Deuce had 5 catches, and so that's a safety valve, but you got to push the ball down the field. We mentioned that you got to get first downs, move the ball. Against a team like Baylor, you just can't run and hit those small chunks. And so for us, we needed to find Brooks more. Like I said, I mentioned Knowles. We needed to find a tight end. We just didn't open it up enough. And so once again, their front four was coming. There was plenty of times where Skylar started to get outside the pocket, and you can see those defensive linemen coming pretty heavily. So once again, welcome to the Big 12, right? That's a top-tier team, right outside of the top 10, as you mentioned earlier. And so it's just one of those games where you had to limit your mistakes. You had to play at your highest, and we didn't do that consistently. But there's some good takeaways for us. I hate it with senior day, right? You want the seniors to go out with a win, but obviously it wasn't the last game of the year. And so I always think the last game of the year is the most important because that's how you prepare yourself into the bowl game and then start off season.
Yeah, I mean, you hate the senior day, especially for Skylar, because everything he's been through in his career, the guy has definitely been a warrior to play through the season-ending injury last year, the injury from earlier this year, and gutted out through the entire season, back to the Bill Snyder era when he was getting yanked back and forth for Alex Delton. It's just been a lot that he's endured throughout his career, and he had played so well for most of this season to have it be a game in which he was just off. The offense was totally off, and then he even gets hurt. He doesn't get to finish the game out on the field. He finishes it by being taken into the locker room on a cart. You just hate that, but it shouldn't subtract anything from his legacy, which I don't think is a top-tier quarterback at K-State, but probably the next level tier quarterback at K-State, especially considering all the circumstances that he went through during his career.
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, he's definitely ahead of the Brian Kavanaughs of the world. You put him right there with Bucky or Matt Miller, Chad May. I mean, he's made his plays and he's made his mark. And even to get more current, you talk about Colin Klein, and where does he really fit in around those guys? And so I think that, his winning ratio will be something we'll always remember. That game, he was 50% throwing the ball. He's been way more efficient this year. And so it's just one of those games. And you have those off games, like I said. But I think for the most part, when you look at the defense, there were some takeaways that I was really impressed with, right? Daniel Green at linebacker is a stud, right? He's getting from sideline to sideline. He's thumping. He's making a tackle for losses. That was big time play. They actually threw some balls on Echo this last game. And so I thought that was important for Echo. He was right there. And so you'll start to get some top tier receivers in the Big 12. Like you said, it's just a matter of getting those repetitions. They haven't thrown the ball his way a lot this year. And so for him, I think that was important. We had Russ on the podcast last week, right? And so you saw Drake Dabney hit a delayed tie-in corner route right on the end zone. And so those are just some of the things that, we'll get used to as we start playing the Baylors and Oklahoma States more and more and more. But obviously, like I said, it was a home game. It was one that was just right for us for the taking. It didn't work out. The missed field goal hurt, but once again, it's a freshman kicker, right? And so when you think about it, there's a lot of things that just didn't go our way. And when you think about that, you look at the good stuff and you take that and you plug it into next week. And so if they can finish strong, once again, 8-4, it's a magnificent year with all the injuries we've had and everything that's taken place. Go to a big time bowl game, play a great team, finish strong, and go on to next year.
Yeah, look, kicker is something I think to be concerned about for right now. And unfortunately, we saw that come to fruition. But you think about that, Chris Tennant misses the field goal. You had the muff punt early on from Phillip Brooks that set Baylor up for a score.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the back-to-back sequence of missing a PI/holding call turning into Baylor muffs a punt, but then it's taken off the board because of violating the ability to catch the football there, which I think is very debatable. And I mean, that's the one, look, K-State didn't lose the game because of the officials or any really of these breaks either. I think Baylor was just the better team, and that's the unfortunate reality. But things could have been different and played out differently had that muff punt gone the other way. I mean, that was like the story of the first half to me is K-State muffs a punt, Baylor gets the football, Baylor muffs a punt, K-State does not get the football. I know that you don't have to make contact technically for it to be the penalty anymore, but what did you think of that call there where they said that K-State interfered with the ability to make the catch?
I mean, obviously he was close, right? And so as a returner, that maneuvered him to the left a little bit, but I don't think it was any contact. Therefore, it should have been a bang-bang play, and it's just part of the game, right? But because it was such an impactful play, they felt like they had to make a call, right? It was just one of those moments where if he would have caught the ball, I don't think it would have been much of an issue. But because it was a turnover, it happened deep in the end zone or in the red zone. It was just one of those things where they made a decision to make a call. It could have gone either way. The intent was obviously not to hit him, but it did bring some type of distraction to the returner as well. But once again, I thought that should have been, Kansas State's ball. But if you look at it, Baylor has 3 or 4 bona fide top 4 or 5 round guys on defense, right? And so they just have talent, right? And it's not a surprise that they beat OU, right? It's not a surprise that they're ranked outside the top 10. Like, they have a legit chance to be one of the top 7 to 8 teams, if not better, this year. And so you just ran across a team that was playing well, definitely played well on the road. Backup quarterback comes in and honestly looks better than a starter, right? It's just a different style play. His confidence was rising. He was hitting the short passes, and he was finding every avenue to make plays, even on 4th down. And what do you do?
Well, that was really the thing. I thought the 3rd down and 4th down conversions were pretty key for Baylor there because I agree with you. I mean, the defense, all told, played well enough to win. I thought it was a very good effort in general from the defense. They did turn the ball over and get K-State a chance that way as well. But, hey, Shapen comes in for Baylor and makes plays here or there. Certainly didn't look rattled. The moment wasn't too big for him. And that could have been a disastrous type of moment for Baylor when Bohannon, who had played basically every snap this year at quarterback, every meaningful snap for Baylor, when he goes down, you start thinking, okay, this could get really interesting. It didn't because of the poise and composure there, the redshirt freshman quarterback. So, yes, give him a lot of credit. At the same time, I still do think the K-State defense, as you kind of mentioned, Aaron, deserves a ton of credit as well, because I don't think that was certainly not the defense that we saw against Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Iowa State during the 3-game losing streak at the beginning of the year. I think it was still the same defense we saw during the 4-game winning streak. difference being in the game, obviously, was that the K-State offense was not what we had seen during the winning streak.
Yeah, you have to control the ball. You have to be able to move the chains. You have to give them some time to get rest back. Jerron McPherson got injured. And so, he gets replaced. And so there's just some changes that took place on the defense that normally wouldn't happen. And so when you move a guy like Jerron out of the lineup with that caliber of experience and talent, like it just changes your dynamic as a secondary. And then you have to overcompensate, but I thought Reggie played well. I think he continued to blitz off the edge as normal, continue to get tackles for losses, as aggressive as ever. I thought the front seven played decent, not great, but decent enough. Like I said, really impressed with how Green was flying around, but they've got some time. We held their running game pretty much in check, right? Yeah. And so to come in with the caliber of running backs that they have a 1-2 punch that's dynamic. I thought we did a pretty fair job. I think they found us in some situations where our safeties were matched up against some of their players that probably wasn't to our benefit, and they found a way to exploit those matchups. And so that was great offensive communication on their end of it. But for the most part, I like the way we played. We held them to 20 points. I mean, anytime you can hold an offense like that to 20 points, you should have a chance to win, right? And so we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot. And then if you think about offensively, to me, Irvin's got to get some more carries because he's a change of pace back, right? 2 carries won't work, right? You've got to find a way to implement him in there. But that's part of getting behind, and then you have to throw the ball. And it just doesn't work to your natural offense. Like I said, we have that 1-2 punch where we like to control the ball. And so for us, just some takeaways going forward, and we need to implement that into this next game against Texas and see how that turns out for us.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the running games go, on one side for Baylor, 21 carries for 46 yards for Abram Smith. That was the Big 12's leading rusher coming into the game. I mean, that was an impressive performance by K-State's run defense to shut him down. That guy had been really good as we think Breece Hall is, as good as we think Deuce is. Statistically, Abram Smith had been more impressive, and K-State kept him to a very minimal impact. And then Deuce had a really nice game, only gets 11 carries. I think if you do want some criticism of the offense, which a lot of it on execution, a lot of it Baylor has a good defense. If there is a criticism to levy against how the game was called, I think it would be to run the football more. And Chris Kleiman even said that in his press conferences since then, was like, yeah, we probably should have given Deuce more touches. And Joe Urban, unfortunately, had an injury, which is, I think, part of why he only had 2 carries. And that's another one of the unfortunate things from this game is that Skylar Thompson gets hurt, Jerron McPherson gets hurt, Joe Urban gets hurt. So after K-State was really, really healthy going into that game, now you wonder about that coming up against Texas on a short turnaround, by the way, where you only have 6 days in between games.
Yeah. I mean, and just to finish off on a Baylor tip, we were down 14-0, right? And so if you think about once that took place from there on, it's basically a 10-6 game, And so, we played well enough to stay competitive and at times to win. We just never got back even with them. And I just don't think we have the firepower today to be a come-from-behind team. And so for us, it's important for us to continue to be even on the forefront. And so that's why that turnover was so big early on, just because it gave them a chance to score. And now we're playing from behind. And so we press a little bit. It changes our philosophy, and it just isn't who we are today. And so maybe that'll change going forward. But I think for us, we've got to find a way, like I said, to get our playmakers involved on the outside. Like, you've got to have a passing game to complement the running game, right? Deuce is doing everything that he can do, but at times there's a 7-8 man front, right? And it's man-to-man on the back end. We've got to find a way to win. And so whether that's, you've got to win in one-on-one matchups, at least 50-50. And so we got to get that confidence behind the quarterback and the receiver just to throw it up sometime and go make plays, because I think our receivers have showcased that they have the hands, they can make the plays. We just have to put them in those positions at times.
Yeah, well, I think to me, the bigger picture point here about this team and where things are at is 7-4. Again, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that's where they'd be going into Texas, would not be surprised. I would think that's pretty much meeting my expectation level for this season. I think the way it's played out, like what we have seen, is that this has been a very, I think, like Bill Snyder 2.0 type of season where they've beaten everybody below them in the standings. They've lost everybody above them in the Big 12 standings, and then here they sit 7-4. And if that plays true to form, they would beat Texas, be 8-4, just like they were in Chris Kleiman's first regular season. And it would be hard to complain about that. But the thing is, you get kind of teased where you start thinking, man, like this team can be good enough to go win one of those upper level games against one of the best teams in the league. And they're just not quite there. And so that is what leaves you with a little twinge and a feeling of kind of disappointment, even though you are here on the precipice of what could potentially be a nice 8-4 season.
But that's what the bowl game's for, right? That's another opportunity to play against a top caliber team. Most likely, probably going to be a top 25 team, hopefully. That's a chance to finish strong, right? And so I think for them, they should look at that. Not looking past Texas, but going ahead and handling your business on the road. But once you get there, you get another chance to showcase to the world how strong you are. And if you can come out and play years ago, how we played well against A&M, down in the Houston Bowl, it just changes the dynamic of how people feel about Kansas State the next year. And so you've got to think about that as you go into the bowl game. You can have it takes one dominant game to change the narrative. And so for Kansas State, I think that's what they should focus on moving forward.
Well, I've got some good news for you on that front. One of the most common bowl projections that I'm seeing right now is K-State going to play in the Cheez-It Bowl, which is in Orlando, which, first of all, I would definitely take that, especially after K-State got passed over for what was then the Camping World Bowl in Orlando a couple of years ago for Iowa State. But the most common opponent that I'm seeing linked there, it's an ACC tie-in, and it's been Clemson as the team in that game. So if you're talking about a chance to get some extra momentum at the end of the year, I'm not sure that it would be much better or get much better than that in bowl season for K-State than playing Clemson at the end of the year. So, hey, Aaron, that would be exactly what you're talking about, a chance to go get a dub against Clemson in the year.
Yeah, you can't beat that at all. I mean, that's a powerhouse. If it's a non-conference game that you probably wouldn't schedule, and so for us, that's an amazing opportunity. And so I think that's just you look at the seniors and all of the players that's on the team. That's the game that matters. And so, like I said, finish strong against Texas. We've got to go up in Texas and execute, right? Texas obviously has some players that are really talented. They're not playing well right now, but they do have the talent, right? And so the last thing we want to do is be the doormat for them to finish strong as well. And so don't know what the morale will be for Texas not going to a bowl game. But for us, I think we still have a lot of boxes to check. Players are still getting better. Guys need to finish strong, and we need to get a win on the road.
Well, so that's the interesting part about Texas is, what are the motivations at play here? I mean, I listened to some of Steve Sarkisian's press conference earlier this week, which included a grand total of one question actually about K-State. It came at the very end, and he was asked about Deuce Vaughn, who, of course, is from Round Rock, Texas, which is very close to Austin. His dad used to be a coach at Texas. So that'll be one of the storylines. I'm sure Deuce really wants to show out in that stadium in front of what I would imagine will be a lot of friends and family. But, man, I mean, it was Sark trying to say, look, we need momentum for next year. We need to play. I mean, he's trying to put together this four-pronged plan of what they still have to play for this year. But, look, the attention is not on that. The focus is not on that. It's been Texas fans wondering what exactly is going wrong. Like, do they need to be – I mean, it's been like hot seat talk with Steve Sarkisian there after just 1 year, as ridiculous as that may be on some levels, but that's the reality of what Texas has been. So do you have a team that's going to throw in the towel? Do you have a team that will be interested in playing here? And on top of that, both of their quarterbacks have been hurt. So we have quarterback injuries on both sides, with two teams going on a one less day rest because the game is on Friday. Like it just feels to me like a game where there's a lot up in the air. You just don't know what's going to happen with either team's quarterback situation. You don't know if Texas will decide to care about this game at all. And tickets right now are going for $3 in Austin. So how many people are going to be in the stadium? What's the atmosphere like? There's just a lot that I think will have to get sorted out between now and Friday.
The one thing I can appreciate is Kansas State always travels well, right? And so you've got a number of K-Staters in Dallas and the Houston area, along with Austin, that will make the trip. And so for us, it's a Big 12 game that we need to win, right? And so regardless of how Texas will approach it, for us, it's another W that we need to get in the win column. And then, like I said, we have further plans to go to the bowl game. And so we need to continue to get the momentum, get our passing game going, get Irvin back into the mix. Hopefully he's healthy, keep Deuce afloat, let him doing what he's doing, and get some experience for some of these guys. And so, as a player, I can care less what Texas wants to do. As long as they show up, then I think we're ready to play.
Yeah, I mean, K-State should be able to win the game. I think even if it's not going to be Skylar Thompson and it's going to be Will Howard, they should still be able to win the game because Texas – look, like Xavier Worthy's a great player. Bijan Robinson was a great player before he got hurt, but unfortunately it doesn't look like he's going to be playing in this game because he's out for the rest of the year with an injury that he suffered. And so that's where, I heard someone talking earlier today about, well, remember, Texas is the team that was up at halftime against Oklahoma. They were up on Baylor. They were up on Oklahoma State. They had leads on all of these teams up at the top of the Big 12 and just couldn't hold them, which I think one shows their toughness or lack thereof, which would not indicate that they would be likely motivated to play this game here at the end of the year. But on top of that, I would just add, like, they do not have Bijan Robinson in this game. They did for those games, and I think that guy's as good a player as there is in the conference.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a massive, massive difference that they're not going to have him available for this game.
Yeah, he's a stud, right? I mean, he'll be one to be talked about for years to come. But, I always think about these games as recruiting tools, right? Texas is a hotbed. If you're coming to try to get guys from Texas, you never know. It could come down to a UT and a Kansas State, and some of these games matter. And so for us, it's just a presence in Texas that we don't get opportunity to have much, especially this year. And so for the most part, you've got to play well. Like I said, it's recruiting. And so you whether it's one player or two players you're trying to get, you never know what can flip them. And so you've got to take that approach when you're playing these games outside of your state.
Well, I couldn't agree more there. It definitely helps. And it's another, I mean, there are a lot of things here. Momentum, as you said, going into the offseason, going into the bowl game, beating Texas, a team that you have not beaten since 2016, doing it in the state of Texas to help out your recruiting. And I just think there's a big difference between 8-4 and 7-5 in terms of how people feel about the regular season, which seems like a silly thing to say, but when you still have the possibility for a 9-win season in the bowl game, and then you're staring down like, okay, well, what if it's 7-5, and then you go play Clemson, and now 7-6 is right there. I mean, you just see how much all that can teeter. So I think to your point there is a lot of significance for K-State in this game, even if it doesn't mean finishing 9-3 and on a winning streak. And, there was some momentum halted against Baylor. I think there still is plenty of significance there.
Yeah. Well, back to what we've said the last 2 weeks, right? This is the third season within the season. And so we talked about going 2-1. And so we're now officially 1-1. And so this is a game that we need to win in order to finish up 8-4. And you're right. 8-4 is a lot better than 7-5 because 7-5 feels like 6-6. It's weird how that works, but that's just how it is. And so I tell guys all the time, it's the difference when you're looking at players that are 5'11" and players that are 6 foot. It's just a difference. It's just one of those measuring sticks that they use. And so for us, 8-win season with opportunity to be 9 and a big time win in a bowl game just sounds better. And it is better.
Yeah. Well, I like that analogy. I think that's very true. The 5'11" to 6 foot thing, that holds very true. As far as the quarterback goes, I am not very confident that Skylar Thompson will play. I do know that he left the game in some form of a boot / air cast and crutches. I'm thinking ankle injury there for Skylar Thompson. So it's not looking good that he'll play here. I think much more likely target would be the bowl game for him to come back and play, which would mean that Chris Kleiman says Will Howard would be the guy if that is the case that Skylar can't go. So I would say one bit of hope there in that is that Texas has a really bad run defense that's allowed 7 straight 100-yard rushers. And we know that Will Howard can really run the ball pretty well, and the coaching staff is not afraid to have him run the ball, which obviously has been a much different story with Skylar in the game. And I think that was even very apparent against Baylor that he wasn't wanting to run the ball a whole heck of a lot. So now you can take Deuce, who's been just a 100-yard rushing game machine, up against this Texas defense that can't stop the run. You can utilize Will Howard in the quarterback run game to ram it down their throats, hopefully. And I would guess that really becomes the game plan there against Texas.
Yes and no, right? Because we can get way too predictable. And if I see too many of those QB runs, I know how it's going to be on 3rd and 6, right? And so I think we've seen that play out before with Will. And unfortunately, yes, he'll break one every now and then. But for the most part, he runs up the guard and just follows through on the guard a little bit. And so I wanted to continue to see us pass the ball when needed, right? Let him rip it. Let him go out there and play free and see if he's our guy for next year. I mean, this is the decision time, right? Put him in a big-time game. Let him play, see what he can do, right? Just because if you're too conservative with him, you don't know what you really, really have. And then next year, you've got to go through this whole scenario again. So it's time to possibly start that QB competition in the offseason. But let them rip it and see what it is when the time comes. And like I said, we've got to get our guys down the field to open up the run game. Otherwise, they're going to have stacked boxes, and we're just going to find ourselves trying to run against an 8-man front.
I think you hit on a very important topic there. This is a game that will dictate a lot of what the conversation will be this offseason, assuming that it is Will Howard that plays at QB, because I think right now there's still a lot of uncertainty about what quarterback looks like next year and moving forward if Will is going to be the guy. And he didn't inject a ton of confidence with his performance earlier this year for the injured Skylar Thompson. He was better against Nevada, in fairness, the last real full healthy game that we saw him, because he kind of got hurt in Stillwater. But there's enough there that left enough to be desired where you're like, oh boy, what does next year look like? If he can come in and engineer a win and look pretty good doing it, I think that'll go a long way toward assuaging some of those fears about what next year is going to look like. Because one thing that's been true about the Kleiman era so far is that when he has had Skylar Thompson healthy at quarterback, Kleiman's been a pretty good coach and winning at a clip that I think is acceptable here at K-State. When Skylar's been out, things look drastically different. So it is fair to wonder, like, all right, what is this going to look like next year without Skylar at quarterback? And Howard, this could go a long way for his confidence and for the fans' confidence in him.
Yeah, I think we've identified enough things in this podcast for us to say that this is an important game for us, right? Mm-hmm. And so I want to see the guys come out and play well. Like I want to see them bounce back. And the goal for me is to end the season with 5 out of 6 wins. I think that's what's important, right? Keep your winning streak going. Even though you lost one game, pick it back up again. And so that's what's going to be of interest to me when I'm watching the game on Friday.
Of course, Texas is leaving the Big 12. Everybody's been getting their shots in at them. And how about this, Aaron? If Kansas beats West Virginia, which the way the Jayhawks are playing right now seems possible, if Kansas beats West Virginia and K-State beats Texas, guess who's finishing last in the Big 12 a year after announcing that they were going to leave for the SEC?
Yeah.
That would be Texas, which would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. There you go. So yeah, I think you're right. I think for us, it's there's enough storylines to say, if they're going to the SEC, which they are, we're still in the Big 12. We're still trying to build a reputation for the Big 12. We got some teams that have committed to come in later on, but we don't want to be at that bottom tier of the Big 12 as Kansas State. And so for us, I'm okay finishing 4th if you've lost to the top 3 teams, right? And so that solidifies us right in the middle. And then we need to continue to get better year after year and figure out how do we make that jump to get to that top tier within the Big 12. And
just one final note here to tell this to our Texas brethren, who I'm sure many of which are listening to this K-State-centric podcast. 4 Big 12 teams in the top 13 right now, the college football playoff rankings in the new look Big 12 with BYU, Cincinnati, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. So it's a feather in the cap for the new league while Texas continues to flounder through what is now a 4-7 season. All right. Well, again, if you are going to be watching the game on Friday, which I'm sure pretty much everybody listening to this podcast will be, stock up on the 360 vodka from Holiday Distillery. Those guys have been great supporters of everything we do here in the Lock It Up with Kurtz podcast and at KCSN in general. And that is going to wrap it up for us. For Aaron Lockett, I am John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another Lock It Up with Kurtz podcast. Also appreciate the work of Tucker Franklin behind the scenes. Yep. We will talk to you with we've got a very special guest planned coming up here for the next podcast. So more details on that coming up. Stay tuned, and we will talk to you soon.